Okay guys, welcome back. So we're going to draft our front skirt block, and we're working with the statistics of a waist of 29, a hips of 38, but since we're going to be hip padding it, we're going to increase the hip from 38 to 40. We use a skirt length of 21 and a hip line of 9. So here I have my vertical lines already drawn out, but I'm still going to go ahead to explain for proper understanding. Since this is going to be an English skirt, I keep 1 inch away, then I now mark out my skirt line. That's why with 1 inch away, I now mark my skirt line, then I added 2 inches bending allowance. With that 1 inch also, I marked out my hip line, which is 9. That means if I'm measuring from here, the hip line now becomes 8. So with that established, we're going to go into drafting the skirt as a whole, the front block. Now I told you, using the waist allocation method, that you do not divide your waist by 2, but rather to get your front waist, we use total waist divided by 2 plus 0.25. So let's say I'm summing up this person's weight to be 30 divided by 2 plus 0.25. My front waist will now become 15 plus 0.25. So I now have 15 plus 0.25, which is what I will now divide by 2 to have my front waist. This is 15.25, which is what I am marking here. Remember, this fabric is on fold, though on this one I did not fold it, just to reduce the amount of pattern paper I used. But now, since I'm drafting only for the front, I divided my 15.25 by 2. And please also remember that when working with patterns, you do not add sewing allowance to the front, to the block. You rather add your sewing allowance when you're transferring it to the main print. So with that established, we go ahead to also input our hip measurement, and we have a new hip of 40. Remember, I said in hip padding, you use the new hip you want to increase to. The client's original waist hips is 38, but I want to increase it to 40. So I'm going to be using 40. And now using the hips allocation method, which states that total hips divided by, for the front hips, is total hips divided by 2 minus 1 or 1.5. Reasons being that a greater amount of the hips happens to fall on the back block. So I am going to be using that. So to get my front hips, I'll use total hips divided by 2 minus 1 or 1.5. So if for a hip of 40, this becomes 20 divided by 2, and I'm going to minusing 1. So 20 minus 1 gives me 19. 19 divided by 2 is 9.5, which is what I am marking out here. Now, just as you may all know from my basic class, that I do not measure the pencil, rather I use a formula for it. So since I'm going to be working with an Ankara for this class, all I have to do is use the formula of total hips minus 6 inches. Since it's an Ankara, if it was going to be a stretchy fabric, I'll use hips minus 8 inches to have my pencil hole. So a hip of 40 minus 6 inches becomes 34. So 34 divided by 2 is 17, and 17 divided by 2 is 8.5. So I go ahead to mark that, and I'm going to connect it. Now, using my hip curve, I connect this point to this area, and then I connect this one. So with that, using my hip curve, I connected the whole area, and we have our front skirt ready. Then last but not the least, I'm going to mark 1.5 inches here, of which I'll connect to meet with the waist area. This is to give the front skirt a curve. If you're conversant with how I draft my skirt block, I will always come in by 1 or 1.5. But if the person tends to have a bigger tummy, you could come down by 2 inches so I could accommodate the tummy area, because the tummy is not straight but over. And please remember this: once you've used the waist allocation method, there is no need for darts for your front block. The reason for this is that the darts end up making the front area bulge. Meanwhile, darts are mostly for contouring, that which is why it is important behind, because behind has the butt and you need that to control the fitting of that area. So thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye. Okay guys, welcome back. So we were about to draft the back block, so I'm going to use this front block as a template, but I'm going to making some little modifications to it. So first thing I did was to keep 2 inches behind here. Then coming here, we said, since we said that total hips is divided by 2, total waist is divided by 2 plus 0.25 to have your front waist, for your front waist. So the back waist is total waist divided by 2 minus 0.25. So going with that, you could have almost the same as what you have in front. So sometimes what I do is just take exactly what is in front for behind, since all the increment has been done to the front block. However, when you come to the hip line, tend to be a little more of increase to the hip block than the front block. So what do I do? Since we had the front hips to be total hips divided by 2 minus 1 or 1.5, or which we used 1 inches, the back block now I'll be doing total hips divided by 2 plus 1 or 1.5. So which takes me to why I need to add 1 inches here. So with that done, all I need to do is connect my pencil hole to meet up with my new hip line. Then it goes all the way back up here, or just slightly bigger, but at least half an inches from the side. So the back block is almost ready. Now coming to the zipper area, what I do is I mark 1 inches here as my zip this thing. Then I use 1.5 here. Then I take half inches all the way down. This would allow my zipper area have a proper bottom fitting, so that the zip sits properly behind. So if you look at what I'm doing, you realize that by the time I'm done, this already has a butt shape behind. So now that I'm using 1 here, if I'm still going to add a sewing allowance to it, it will become 2, which when you turn it returns back to 1, or I could add half inches on these areas. So with that, my back block is ready. I'm going to indicate here so that I know where my zipper allowance starts. Do well to label your front block and your back block respectively. Now, unlike the front block, the back block will now have a dart. For a nipple to nipple of 7, that will be 3.5, but to make it sit at the right point, I'm going to mark 4 inches, then come down by 5.5 to 6 inches as my dart level. So I introduce my dart at this point. And we are good to go. So finally, what I have to do is just cut this out. I didn't cut out at the beginning so that it could serve as I won't mix up things while trying to draft the back block. So but with that now done and I have my back block, I'll just level here as my back block. Indicate the appropriate line, then I will cut out. So thank you so much for watching. My name remains Uncle Tunas. Bye. Okay guys, welcome back. If you look at this, I've used my pattern to trace out on my fabric, but I added 1 inch sewing allowance on the side blocks of it. So with that, I'm done cutting my fabric and we were about to go into the main business of the day, which is hip padding. So first thing first, I'm going to be starting with my front block. Now I want you to listen carefully. Okay guys, so this is the analysis for the front hip pad. All what I'm doing is, because I want to make a high waist skirt, I'm going to drop by 2 inches from the waistline, and which is what I marked. Then at the hip line, I'm going to come down by 5 inches, which is here, which is presumed to be our under hip area. Then I'm also going to mark 1 inch down. Now, coming to this area, in most cases, people tend to use the front dart as the clue for increasing this area, but in the absence of dart for this front block, I'm still going to check out my dart point, which is 4 or 4.5, and I'm going to mark. Now what you have to do is connect this point to that area, then coming down, all you have to do is ensure that you blend it in to this extra 1 inches you added. This is to avoid the idea of your pad bulging, but rather to make your pad blend into your body. So once that is done, you could label your pad as the front pad. Remember, this could be used to draft both the left and right hand side front pad, or if you have all the time, you could also as well still draft another one for the left hand side. Please ensure to know the difference between the left and from the right. So next one is the back pad. Now this is what I did to achieve the back pad. This is my hip line, and this is the under hip line, of which I said is 5 inches, and this is my 1 inches. So the only thing I now introduced was I came to where my zipper area is. This is my zipper area, which I used 1.5, and I came in by 2 inches from my zipper area. Then I connected from the 2 inches down we had here to the 2 inches I got here. Then I connected it to blend in, just as I did in the front block. So basically that's how to get your hip padding pad for both the front and the back. So you see, I labeled it my back pad, and remember, this is for the right hand side. And once I flip it over, I can use this to get my back pad. Then last but not the least, always ensure to indicate the midpoint on both pad, that's the hip line, because this would work very important when you're joining your pads together. It's the same thing as notching your nipple point where you're making a bust here. So thank you so much for watching, and God bless. Bye. Okay guys, welcome back. So here I have my 1/4 inch foam. It's actually not up to have an inch foam, which I got. I don't know how much is sold in your city, so I got this, and from our calculation, we want to turn a hips of 38 to 40, so that means we need to make a padding of at least not lesser than half inch on both the front and back of one side block. Same thing applicable to the other side. So to achieve that, what I had to do was, for each side I had to make two parts. So as this is right now, this is two parts, which will now give me exactly half an inch of padding for one side. Now what I have here is the left back part. It's for the left hand side, and I want to remind you that when I did that, I used my pattern. This pattern is actually for the right hand side, so for you to use it to get the left hand side, all you have to do is flip it over. I flipped it over and I used it in drafting this other part, but I introduced half inches on the front block for the joining of which we will be doing to this pattern. So same thing is applicable for the front. So with this now, we have on this side, half on this side, we now have 1 inch on one side of the hips and another 1 inch on the other side of the hip. Please note that it is important that you label your hip part so that you don't use the right on the left hand side and the left on the right hand side. So it is very important that you note how to do that, and also remember that you don't necessarily have to use a 1/4 inch foam where you have to double this way to get it. You could see there are 1 inches foam in the market, so just look for the one available to you and you use it. And also remember that some persons use wadding, the grey light kind of wadding too, for hip padding. So any material that is available in your city, you could use it, but here I prefer using the soft foam for my padding. So what next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a U40 gum on this side to hold these two together, then I tag. If you don't have a U gum, you could just tag it along before you proceed. So follow up with me and let's prepare a part which we would now add to the skirt block. Thank you. So guys, this is it. I've tagged the two foams to become one for the front hip pad and the back hip pad for the left hand side. So next thing I'll be doing is incorporate this to become one pad. How do I do that? This is where your gumming becomes very important. So I'm going to apply gum on both sides here and also on this part. You could use Who gum or E6000. Then after which, using these as my clue. Remember, I was very emphatic about knowing the midpoints. Using these as my clue, I have the center lines, just like what you do when you're making a bustier. I have the center point. I would start gumming from the center. Immediately I'm done gumming from the center, I will now tag it along. At the end of the day, it should give you a curved like shape like this. It should give you a curved like shape as if you joined a bustier. So I'll go ahead to gum, then tag, then I'll show you the end result for you to see. Guys, so I used my Who gum for it. So I'm joining. I first started with the middle part so that I have the points together. So I'll go ahead to close this other area. You could still apply more gums. If yours runs out quickly, you could apply more gums to this area just to hold it intact for you. So you use that to hold it in place, and you do same for this area. So now if you take a look at this, our hip shape is coming out gradually and nice. You could see our hip shape is gradually coming out. Apply gum where necessary to make it whole. However, for me, I don't stop only at this level. I still go as far as tagging it together with my needle and thread so that it could stay firmer and more certain for me. You don't want your pad going off inside your client's clothes, so I go ahead to tag, and I'll be doing that all the way to the end. Okay guys, so this is it. I've had my joining area tagged with my needle and thread so that it holds it firm. So this is it, and you could see our hip is already coming out well and nice. Now this brings us to the next level. Using these on the garment would show, and that would be too obvious that, oh, this person has padded his or her hips. So what do we do now? We are going to blend this pad in such a way that when it's now on the fabric, when it's now attached to the cloth, it doesn't show. So what do? Some persons use razor, but I'm going to use a scissors to do so. What do? I blend the edges. This needs a little level of tacticality, so you have to be patient and follow your instincts. I'm going to be blending the edges all the way round. I'll be blending the edges all the way around. If a scissors works for you, well, you could use it, but me, I prefer, if a razor works for you, rather, you could use it. You need to blend it in so that the edges lays flat. Now, aside this technique, there are other techniques to blending. What some people do is that they sew around the edges. They sew 2 to 3 times around the edges. But me, I prefer to trim this way, but sewing around the edges also works pretty fine. So use whatever works for you amongst the two techniques, and you have a perfect result. So what am I doing? I am blending the edges so that it is flat. The whole idea is to make this area as smooth as possible. Now, once I'm done with this, another proper technique I will be using to conceal this is using a hairstay around the trimmed area. But since I'm not doing this for a client, it's more or less for the purpose of this class. I won't have to do that. So once I'm done trimming this edge, I would just proceed with fixing it to our garments. So I am trimming this. Remember, the idea of the trimming is not just to trim, it's to make it blend in, blend with the body. It should not be obvious, so you have to blend your trimming in. So that's all you have to do for both parts. Okay, welcome back guys. So I have my skirt block sewn out already, and also this is the lining for it sewn out already. Yes, some of you would be asking, you did not sew the lining on the sides of the fabric like some of you do for your skirt block. Well, this is because this skirt is going to be padded. If it was not going to be padded, you would use the other method, though there are certain persons that use this technique in their garments. That way all seams is hidden in between the lining and the fabric. So I had my skirt already sewn out with my dart at the back block. Remember, I told you no darts at the front block, using our waist allocation technique. And with that, we are going to proceed quick and fast into attaching our padding, which is the most important part of the class right now. Now this pad is for the left hand side. This part is for the left hand side. So to get it right, I will come to my lining and I'm going to mark 2 inches below, after which I would now carry my pad, and I'm going to be applying a little bit of my glue gum on the edges of it so that it can stick. You could still mark out your hip point on the fabric so that it aligns properly. So now watch me. With this at the edge, I now arrange it middle to middle, and I position it in the side of the skirt, middle to middle, and I position it in the side of the skirt. Now if you still want to take a step further, you could tag everywhere in with your hand needle, or if you have enough glue gum, you could use a glue gum to hold it everywhere to the fabric. So but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be tagging it after I use the glue gum to hold it to where I wanted it. I'm going to be tagging it to stay firm at each point. So I have done that for this side, and once I achieve the firmness I want, for the purpose of this video I'm using a contrasting color thread so that you could see what I'm doing. Remember I said if you have enough glue gum at your disposal, you could use your glue gum to hold the whole of this area to it. Now look at it, it's picking shape. So I'll come here again, I'll come to this side quickly, and I will still tag. Remember I said you could use your glue gum to hold everywhere in, which is the most proper thing to do. Ensure it is relaxed, it's properly relaxed on the lining. Remember our lining is 2 inches shorter than our normal skirt length, and I'm going to do same for this side and this side. I'm going to do same for this side and this side so that everything is firm. Then I could still now put a little bit of glue gum on the sides to just hold it in place. Okay guys, welcome back, and this is the last segment of our hip padding class. So I want to attach my pad lining that has the hip padding on it to this one. So this is what I do. The front of my lining facing the front of my fabric, I now start from the joining point to sew. So I'm going to be sewing from one joining point to the next joining point. Then I can now complete the edges of it. And I'm sewing by 1/2 inch. Now at any point, if you realize that your lining is slightly longer than one, you'd have to loosen it and correct it. Or you could just make a pleat if it's something too tiny. But for detail's sake, I recommend you loosen and correct it so that all joining points will meet at the exact place. But if it's quite little, you could just make a tiny pleat to hold it in, and you proceed. See why it was important that we started from one edge to the other edge to sew. Now I can now complete to the end. And I'll quickly go over to this other area, and I would also sew to the end. Please ensure to keep your seam lines open, as this will make the fitting outside come out neatly because already this has been ironed. So I'm going to sew here by half inch, which is quickly followed by a top stitch once I am done. So with that, I'm going to make my top stitch. Remember, this faces the back side. It's just the same principle as turning your lining. So I'll be doing this all the way to the end. Now that I have this done, next thing I'll be doing is to close my zipper area. Now look at what's going to happen. Because the lining was shorter than the main fabric, the lower part now has a turn up so that here can align to the edge. Here has a turn up, here has a turn up so that here can align. So I'm going to be sewing by half an inch on that area so I can close. Then I'll proceed to closing my zipper area. So you see, knowing the proper basics is very important, and hip padding could be quite simple and easy for any. So guys, welcome. So this is what it feels like when everything has been turned in. I gave it a good praise on the sides, and our padding is already coming out nice on both sides. So last but not the least thing I'll be doing now, I was going to explain this. Remember, we added the other way in, we added the padding this other way in, but now when we pull it this way, the pad comes to the front. That means it's collapsible this way, but when you're done with everything, you hit it and it collapses to the front to now settle on the front. So please remember that and don't get confused. Now last but not the least, I'm going to be closing my zipper area. Then I'll keep room for my vents. Then we'll call it a wrap on this one. So now remember, in mine I used 1 here, 1.5, then half inches all the way down. So with the whole essence that I have now turned my lining, here is going to become half, here is going to become 1, then I sew by half of an inch all the way down. So using a loose stitch, I would sew here by half an inch, then coming here I sew by 1, then I graduate back into half an inch all the way down. Now you could stop here, tighten it and make loose stitches, since here is going to be my vent area, which this is quite a short skirt, so I can use 5 or 6. But if it's the other overlap kind of vent, you would just have to stop here, then sew this other way out to get it. But this one I'll just tighten here and I will go all 6 stitches all the way down. So that's all for how to pad your garments. So I look forward to every one of you practicing, and I could see your results. I'll put this up on the mannequin so that you could see the final outcome. But so far so good. This is looking all nice and all sexy. So far so good. This is how it is going. So I'll put it on the mannequin for you to get a proper feel of it. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for choosing me, and I do hope to get your results and feedback on how your hip padding works. And please don't forget to always iron as you sew. Ironing while sewing cannot be overemphasized. I remain your teacher and friend, Uncle Tunas. Remember to put your band and your zip. Thank you.